Hey there, it's Llarold, and it's been a while. I'll be releasing updated class guides soon, but for now I'd like to discuss the elephant in the room. Brewmaster Monks were changed in patch 7.2.5. Ironskin Brew was the main victim of the patch. Formerly it had no cap, and now it's capped at 24 seconds assuming you have 4 points in Potent Kick. Brewmasters have been vocal about their frustration that Blizzard would make this change right as Tomb of Sargeras is about to launch. And I understand. It's a big change. Being in this position, and it is a position that Brewmaster Monks have been in a ton of times, feels pretty bad. The best argument I've heard for why this change should happen came from Troxism, the Blood DK theory crafter. Imagine if a Blood DK had no runic power cap, and they could just build as much RP as they possibly could. That would let them Death Strike only when it's super efficient, and otherwise just hold a huge supply of runic power until the hard parts of a fight. Then they could just spam Death Strike straight through to the end and never really be challenged by anything in the fight, even hard-hitting mechanics or in rage phases. That would be overpowered. It's also pretty much how monks have been built for most of the expansion. They could build several minutes of Ironskin Brew time up, and then just spam Purify all the way through the last few minutes of the fight, and bing bang boom, unkillable tank. This change requires that Brewmasters are a lot more mindful from moment to moment with their active mitigation, but it'll ultimately result in fewer wasted brews. Before the patch, you could regularly end an encounter with 4 minutes left on Ironskin Brew. That's 30 Purifying Brew casts totally wasted. After the patch, you may not have quite as many huge Purifies, but you'll probably waste 5 brews or less, as opposed to dozens. Logs from the first week of raiding show that most Brewmasters are taking 10 to 20% less damage than they were before the patch. I think this underlines how the new brew usage is going to work out better overall, even if it requires more awareness to play well. As for how it feels, well, when you're tanking high damage bosses and have to purify pretty often, this change really doesn't feel that noticeable. For fights with tank swaps or forced downtime though, brew generation is way less efficient, and trying to maintain Ironskin Brew can get kinda frantic. My primary issue though is how it affects the opener. Opening with Black Ox Brew is much less smooth, as you either have to use Purifying Brew at the start of a fight when it won't really do any good, or you have to delay your Black Ox Brew cast, which isn't any good either. You basically have to play like a grandma, really slow and steady with all of your active mitigation. Let's touch on some of the other changes to Brewmaster. Ironskin Brew's stagger value was nerfed by 5%. Purifying Brew's stagger reduction was also nerfed by 10%, but a new trait was added that increases Purify by 4%, so it's a 6% loss. Brewmasters gained a 25% armor buff in order to balance everything out in terms of physical damage, which means that these changes are really just a nerf to Brewmaster's spell damage reduction. This is because Brewmasters were too good at dealing with spell damage in the Nighthold, and they're still gonna be really good. Actually, since I first started writing this, Brewmasters got hit with another nerf to their spell damage reduction, bringing them down to only 40% of their stagger working on spells instead of 50%. Again, I still think that Brewmasters will be good at mitigating spell damage. They might be better than anyone else, but this is really the difference between them being good and too good. One big buff that Brewmasters got is that Blackout Strike and Breath of Fire both now generate stacks of Elusive Brawler. This is a pretty big buff that will result in a lot more dodges. Unfortunately, this buff came at the cost of Blackout Strike's cooldown no longer scaling with haste. Normally that's not a big deal, but when you're under Bloodlust or Heroism, a 3-second Blackout Strike cooldown feels weird. It's also about a 10% single target DPS loss according to this week's logs, which is not great considering Brewmaster's single target damage before the patch was already on the low side. So is Monk still good? Time will tell, but I remain cautiously optimistic. There were big playstyle changing nerfs in the patch, but there were also good defensive buffs that balanced them out. 1 week of raiding is certainly not enough to tell, but the first week's performance numerically was actually pretty good. Even if the playstyle doesn't feel great, it's hard to argue with numbers, and I tend to think that Brewmasters are going to have a good chance of being really strong tanks in Tomb of Sargeras. I think my biggest suggestion would be if you liked your Brewmaster before the patch and you don't really like it so much now, give it time. Keep playing with it, keep practicing it, and trying to get comfortable with it, and maybe you'll come to find that you like it more than you think you did initially. That's what I'm hoping for myself. I've started streaming on Twitch lately at Llarold Live, so check it out and give me a follow. Thanks for watching. Bye.